So I'm going to tell you something that none of you know, but teens are playing video games. I think, sometimes when people ask publishers who plays your games, they'll look at things like the demographic information they get on the payments through the credit cards, and they'll say, well, we don't have any under 18s playing. But the point is, they do. We interviewed quite a few parents and kids around this. We had a lady recently, a parent, and she was sitting up being interviewed by us, and her 4 kids were around her, various ages from about 12 to probably about 17. And she said she got this huge bill from Apple, 4-digit bill from Apple on her credit card. And she asked her kids, has anybody been using the account, to buy games and play games? 4 kids looked at her in the eye and said, no, not us, no. So she asked them again, no. She called the credit card company. The credit card company said, we can't deny the charge because Apple's put this charge through. She called Apple. Apple said, somebody used your account to buy these games. We can tell you the games. So they sent her a list of games. The next night over dinner, I'm sure it was very unpleasant, Mum gets hold of 4 kids and reads off the games. Right, Clash of Clans, who plays that? And she goes first to her daughter, and her daughter says, it's a boys' game, it wasn't me, and looks at the oldest son in the eye. One by one, the kids confess, and she figured out that, yes, indeed, her kids had played these games and purchased the games. Now, she was a very cool mum as it happened, and her point was that she didn't mind her kids playing these games. She saw it as part of their entertainment and something they wanted to do, and she's willing to pay for them to be entertained. What she didn't like about it was what she felt was, as she described, the smash and grab, that there was just no control. And I think, that's one of the things that we've certainly seen is teens are playing these games. They have purchasing power. There's about just under 40 million teens in the United States with about 200 billion in annual purchasing power. 78% of US teens have $50 or more to spend, which seems quite high. But a big problem with this is that they're getting this in the form of cash. And it's a challenge for them now as more and more teens, nobody uses the mobile internet more than a teenager, over all the demographics. They're online, they're playing these games, they're playing both mobile games and more laptop-based games. But they're very restricted in their ability to pay for their transactions. They don't have credit cards, they don't have PayPal. And that's where some of these problems come in. I was actually up in Canada last week with my family, and we were talking about this over dinner. And my 2 cousins who are in their 50s, were saying, really, wow, this happens. And all of a sudden their son, who's 21, blurts out, oh, Habbo Hotel, man, I played that continuously when I was a kid. I would do anything to get coins to play in that game. His dad turns to him and said, really? Now, this kid, Carson, he's 21 then, I guess he's figured the statute of limitations on abusing your parents' credit cards is now over, so he can confess he is not living in the house anymore, so I guess the possibility of being thrown out has gone away. So he felt he could confess. And, Carson said, yeah, Dad, you remember when you gave me your credit card to buy those pair of hockey pads when I was, for the goalie? And his dad goes, yeah. And he said to his dad, well, you didn't really check it much after that, did you? And Carson had, before the day of the iPhone, I go, hey, no, actually the iPhone would have been there, but he'd either written down or taken a photograph of the card and used it quite merrily for the following 6 months. So, I think what we look at with this is there's a pretty big problem here around friendly fraud, and that is when, it is a valid credit card, it's registered to somebody, they're a real person, there's been no identity theft, but it's been used by somebody else without their permission. So there's about just over 11 billion in friendly fraud on a year. This leads, for game companies where this gets serious, it leads to chargeback fees. And it also leads to kind of credit problems. When you're dealing with credit card companies and they see a lot of chargebacks, they're likely to not want to work with you for much longer. So this is a big issue. you know, we all know that the way we publish games has really changed over the last 5 years, and so much now we're looking at the games that are in the circuit. So by a circuit, I mean something like an Amazon network or an Apple, the iTunes, the App Store, Google Play, and Facebook with Facebook games. Now these publishers at the moment, you've got a situation where Apple has been hit with a couple of lawsuits, a class action lawsuit, but also it's been sued by the federal government for really what happened to that lady with the kids, being able to use the account to purchase items without anybody's consent or permission. Apple's fighting out in the moment in Europe. The European community is taking a look at Apple on this issue. I saw something the other day. When Apple was being investigated in the US, their top lawyer said to the federal government, well, okay, enough about us, you should go and have a look at Google, which is kind of like ratting out Google. So Apple ratted out Google. Amazon are faced with this at the moment. And I think one of the big issues they're dealing with is, and we all do this, I've got kids, they play games on my iPhone. Apple, Google, Amazon are somewhat tied to the device. So when somebody uses this device and I make a purchase, that's fine, but if my kid makes it or one of my kids make it, you don't know that it wasn't me. I actually think Facebook is in a little better position to deal with this, because with Facebook, you use your Facebook account. So if you've got a family of 4, they've probably all got a Facebook account. So really what this is about, what the problem is here that Apple's dealing with, that Google is dealing with, is at the point of purchase, when somebody makes a transaction, are they who they appear to be? We've got a credit card or other payment method linked to their account, but are they really, you know, who they say they are? A couple of issues come into play, COPPA and CARU. So COPPA is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. It really focuses in on the under 13 audience. This law was brought in 1998 when internet games first started to become popular. And you know, really what the federal government was trying to do is, you cannot ask somebody who is or you suspect to be under 13, you cannot ask them for their first and last name, you can't ask them for their email address, you can't ask them for their physical address. So all of that makes doing a transaction with them pretty much appears impossible, pretty hard. And some game companies choose to focus purely on the 13 plus audience because they don't want to have to deal with COPPA. CARU is 12 and under. So companies like Habbo and Gaia, for instance, both use our technology, Oink, and as part of it, if a 12-year-old goes to buy something on Habbo and Gaia, we don't allow them to make a purchase. On the other hand, there's companies like Woozworld, and they've chosen to embrace that under 13 audience. Their core demographic is really 9 to 14. So our technology provides a COPPA-compliant method where the parent effectively digitizes the allowance. So if you could imagine, a parent might say, all right, I'm going to let you spend $10 a week, and I know you like playing these games, so off you go, you can play those games. We've now got an audit trail that parent has allowed that to happen. In the case of Woozworld, if you're 12, you're 11, as long as your parent has said you can make that purchase, we allow you to go ahead and make that purchase. These are some of the companies that you're going to be using Oink, and you know, to give you an idea, it's our technology is not just for gaming. We're integrated with some major merchants as well. It's a bit like Forbes actually called it PayPal for kids. So with a simple username and password, you can make a transaction. The key is that the parent has pre-approved that. The parent has said, here's your allowance. The digitized allowance is online. The teen now has some spending power, and as long as it's within the parent's controls where they've said they can spend it and how much they can spend, that transaction goes through. So we really don't see chargebacks in our system because, as I say, everything has been pre-approved. On the tweens and teens, some of our biggest, most popular games that we're currently working with are Woozworld, Habbo, and Gaia. And then under teens and young adults, Crytek with Warface will be coming up soon, Wargaming. Tencent with the very popular Crossfire, first-person shooter. And Ubisoft has recently signed on with us, so we will be a payment method coming up for most of Ubisoft's games. So that's my presentation today. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey, so as with your the gaming element, what do you see is the kind of biggest roadblock to overcome with the consumer once you have them, once you're live with a gaming company to get exposure and things like that?
So the way we look at that is, for us, there's two constituents. There is the teen or tween, and then there is the parent. Parents tend to like this technology because it puts some controls in place. And most parents, 10 years ago, parents might have said, I'm not going to let my kid play video games. But it just seems like that's gone. Everybody's kind of become more aware and said, well, when I was a kid, I used to put a quarter in a machine and play Pac-Man. So this is just the natural evolution of that. I think what the parents don't want is you do see some of these games on the App Store. I mean, I'm a parent myself, and I've seen some games, and it says free to play, and then you get in there, and the first thing they do is they're trying to get you to spend $49.99 or something ridiculous. And you know that the only person that's going to press that button is somebody that really doesn't understand money. So I think parents love that, our technology can safeguard against that kind of thing. And then for teens love it. Because if you think about this, so many times in life, you see kids, we buy them stuff, we take care of everything. All of a sudden they go to university, and bang, the credit card companies descend, and they've really never managed their own money. So anytime you give a teen a chance to take control, to empower themselves, they tend to rise to it. So we tend to see pretty big adoption. We've got about 1.2 million consumers at the moment. And each time we bring on a new game, often about a quarter of the players on any one of these games are under 21, which, 14 to 21 is probably our core audience using this technology.
I was just wondering if you could walk us through about how difficult it is for a developer to integrate Oink into their game, and what steps would be needed. I'm seeing some companies up there I know have multiple games on the market. So
right.
So why are certain games approved and certain ones aren't? Are they ones that they identified would have a high percentage of children, or is it just an ease of integration sort of thing?
I think, to give you an example on that, something like Ubisoft has got something like 81 games out there at the moment. So we're doing, and not all of them use the same commerce platform. So we're doing a bit of a phased approach with Ubisoft where, say, 20 games are on this platform, so you'll see those 20 kind of go live first. We have both a SOAP-based API for a very intense integration. When I say intense, it's a username and a password. So it looks probably more like PayPal than anything you've ever seen. We have a form post integration, which is kind of how PayPal does it, where it comes out in a separate window. But we notice, particularly with the game companies, they tend to want to keep it in their frame, and we can do that with the SOAP API. So a typical, signed contract to live is probably somewhere around 3 to 4 weeks, with really 1 week for the bulk of the work and then testing to be done.
I've got one.
Alrighty.
I'm also a parent and a reformed game developer. So I'm curious to hear more about the sort of parent experience of what I was really intrigued by the description on your website where you kind of talked about letting the kids manage their money, but also that the parents still have some measure of control. And obviously that's a tricky balance to get right. So I was kind of curious to hear what that looks like today, and then how much of that has been shaped by your user testing and sort of how that's evolved as a result of putting in the hands of both kids and parents.
It's a great question, and we have our what you see today is not where we started, and I think we looked at this and we were like, oh, they're children, we'll use our logo, we'll make it pig and make it orange, and we'll show different levels. And we came up with this interface. We threw it in front of the kids, and the kids went, ugh, that's for a 3-year-old. And we're like, no, it's for a 12-year-old. So one day one of our product managers looked at us and just said, you know, teens are really just small adults. And we're like, as a light bulb went off, he's right. So the interface itself, we've tried to make it simple, so it's simple to use and pleasurable to use, but it's not dumbed down for that audience. The parent experience is, you know, we've tried to make it simple because we're all busy as parents, right? So the guys at Wells Fargo said to me, you've got to make it set and forget. So that's what we've aspired to do. So the idea is a parent can go in, you can say, I'm going to let you spend $10 a week. And you say, all right, my kid is, say, 15 years old. And we then say the following merchants and games are deemed appropriate for a kid of that age. As a parent, you can either say, I'll take the whole lot, which, by the way, 90+% do. They just trust our curation. Or you can go in and say, this is okay, this one's not. And by the way, even though this game is approved for 15 plus and he's 14, I'm actually going to let him play it. So at the end of the day, we deliver the full control to the parent. And then a parent can get SMS or email notifications anytime a purchase is made. The kid can never spend beyond the limit. And then there's some subtleties in the system, like, you know, if a kid needs, say, $2 more and they're at the limit, they can send a fast message to the parent, and the parent can quickly approve an overspend and things like that.
Hi. I had a quick question. You had mentioned that you saw a core audience of 14 to 21-year-olds. Is under your terms of service, does Oink also serve kids younger than that, like under COPPA compliance?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We are, you know, that's where we started. And, you know, a core part of our technology is at the point of transaction, the consumer, so a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, is not identified to the merchant in any way, and the merchant does not ask them for any personally identifiable information. So we are certified. You know, if you think about it, we deal with the two things you care about you most, the money and your kids, right? So we are PCI DSS level 1 in terms of handling credit cards and payment information, and we're also COPPA compliant. We're certified by both Trustee and ESRB. On the COPPA compliance side. We actually work closely with the federal government out of Washington, D.C. Anytime we do a major change, we show them the change because we just want to make sure we're always in line with their thinking. And, you know, when you look at the government, the FTC, and what they're trying to do, it's a difficult job, right? They get a lot of complaints. You know, the big companies, Disney and people weigh in, but they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to provide a level of protection. And the world has changed from being internet games when they first started to iOS games or Android games. And I really think they're just trying to keep in step with that. And we try to keep in step with them and make sure we're compliant with what they're trying to do. And so far it's worked well for us because when we rolled out in the UK authority says, oh, this works for COPPA, that's fine by us. Now we're launching in Germany. Again, the requirements of the German market are met and exceeded by the COPPA standard. So,
what is the platform breakdown as of now? And then how does that map onto demographics?
Sorry, what's the platform?
The platform breakdown, like iOS, Android, like where is the body of the audience?
Well, right now, so Apple does not include us as a payment system, so we are not available yet on the iOS platform.
Okay.
So most of our games right now is really on the internet, you know, internet web-based games.
Got it, okay.
You're going to see us where we've added in. But we're obviously in discussions with some of these networks to include us as a payment system.
Okay, and do you have a sense of the demographic breakdown from that? Like, is this a product utilized mostly by upper middle class? Like,
in terms of okay, so we have some statistics. I don't think we know that.
Okay.
We kind of know we're roughly 50-50 boy-girl. We know that 70% of our audience is between 14 and 21. So that's the bulk. We have some below. We have about 20% below and a few over. We can tell what the average spend is. We can tell the average spend by category, so we know whether kids are spending more on, say, clothing versus games or various things like that. And gaming actually seems to be one of the highest spend categories. Given the choice, kids tend to want to spend on games.
Right.
Seems to be a big thing. So we kind of know the average basket size. We can also see things like repeat transactions. And as you might suspect, like a kid maybe goes to Journeys and buys a pair of shoes, and then they don't go back for 6 months, but they'll buy every 6 weeks on gaming. So once it's under control, you'll see a lot of repeat transactions on the gaming side.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.